Daniel Naroditsky is one of the best online players. In fact, in this game against Jan Krzysztof Duda, one of the best players in the world, he played this game in the fighting King's Indian defense, leading to an absolutely stunning finish. So Jan Krzysztof Duda begins with the move d4, going for a more positional type of game. Daniel Naroditsky responds with knight to f6, going for his classic King's Indian. The idea of this is you want to have a little bit less space with the hopes that white will close the center to allow you to have a free hand to attack on the king side. So of course we see bishop to e2. This is in fact the main move. You want the bishop on e2 because if you put it on d3, it's just sort of staring at these pawns and not doing too much. So on e2 it's got a better chance. It could even support a pawn push, maybe getting to h5, but not in these more classical variations. You're just going to try and route over to c4 or something like that. So we see e5, castles, and then e takes d. And here Daniel Naroditsky actually ventures off the more beaten path. He decides to grab in the center. After the pawn recaptures, goes for the move rook to e8, immediately putting a lot of pressure on white's sort of slightly overextended central pawns. As we see, white is a sort of Maroczy bind type structure, but this can quite easily be attacked with black's well-placed pieces, as this bishop on the long diagonal could become an absolute monster further down the line. Duda just goes f3, quickly defending his quite weak central e-pawn, but Daniel doesn't waste any time and goes c6. This basically means that in future he might get an outpost on d4, but white's never going to have that corresponding outpost on d5. So this sort of spiky structure definitely serves to keep the squares closer to his camp very well defended. Here Duda just goes king to h1, making sure there's no nonsense along this b6 to g1 diagonal, and then Naroditsky just goes knight to a6. It's a little bit of an inaccuracy, but this is his sort of tricky sideline, and the idea is to take his opponent out of any theory he will know, and make sure Naroditsky's the only one with any prep left. So Duda goes bishop to f4, which is not the best move in the position because it immediately allows knight to f5, hitting the bishop. And whenever in the King's Indian you can get an uncontested dark square bishop, it can be very good for you. And we look at everything on this diagonal. You've got two knights, a pawn, and a rook that come under fire by this bishop. And if you can get this bishop out of the way so it doesn't trade for it, it's going to be extremely strong. So the bishop decides to rotate back to e3, wasting a tempo. And now Daniel's knight is actually quite well placed on the edge of the board. You can actually jump forward into the board and then check this king. And if this opens up and the queen gets in, it can get extremely nasty very quickly for that white king. So Daniel proceeds with f5, immediately launching more forces into the center of the board, trying to open up that white position. Duda just goes queen d2, threatening to trade off that dark square bishop, but again, Naroditsky isn't wasting any time. f4, and you can't even take that pawn. If you're going to take that pawn, I can just capture back, and after queen captures, your knight on d4 is actually hanging, so black will end up a piece. So of course, the bishop has to retreat, and then Daniel Naroditsky goes bishop to e5, securing that pawn, making sure it's not going to be weakness in future, and Duda goes rook fd1, trying to start cooking, trying to start some play in the center of the board, but that's not where it's demanded of him. Knight to g3 check, with the idea being you can't take this knight. If you want to capture, I'm just going to recapture with the pawn. The bishop is hit, it's going to have to go back, and after something like queen h4 check, you're going to be mated pretty quickly. So with check, you can't take the knight, you're going to have to move your king. The king just slides over, and now this continues with queen to h4. This is just a move applying a lot more pressure to this king, with a sneaky idea that's going to come into play a little bit later after Duda plays rook a to b1, trying to start some play on the queen side, typical of these King's Indian type games. Naroditsky goes rook to f8 with this sneaky idea of trying to move this rook up and just get it over to h6 and start a massive checkmating assault on this white king. So Duda does not go the right response, he goes b4, missing this key idea. In fact, he had this move c4, and if white was to capture, he was going to play b4, and if the knight goes back to e6, which is the best move, he would pin that knight to the king, and basically black has a lot of problems arising from this quite weak diagonal here and the king being kind of exposed. And in this position, if you want to defend your knight after b5, the white basically breaks through on the queen side and it's too much for handle, and this attack is not quick enough to checkmate the white king before that happens. So it's on that classic King's Indian knife edge. But in the game, Naroditsky just goes rook to f6 again, setting up this idea. Duda misses it, goes b5, and Naroditsky doesn't even care. g5, sacrificing a full knight on the edge of the board. If you were to take, which I'm not sure happens in the game, he's just going to go rook to h8 anyway, so it doesn't matter. Bishop f1 played, but the thing is, again, Naroditsky's just too quick. Bishop f1 doesn't really defend anything, it's defending this square here. If the rook comes over, it's not going to matter. But the thing is, you could be even quicker. He can play the move queen to h2 check. In this move, Duda resigns, as you simply can't take that queen, and there's no square for your king to go to. If you want to take that queen, king takes h2, you can just check with the rook, and as all these squares are controlled, the king has to go back, and then gets mated over on g2 with this beautiful knight and rook checkmate. So an amazing game from Naroditsky. Hope you guys thought that was interesting. If you did, maybe leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. So hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. I've got lots more interesting games to show you, and that's it for today's video.